Hi, everyone. Welcome to today's lecture on different types of feminism compared to different types of desserts, namely pie, because it turns out human rights are not pie. Let's begin. So, under patriarchy, resources are disproportionately granted to men, and women don't have as many resources as men do. So, if patriarchy were a pie graph, it would look like the pie graph on the left. Under liberal feminism, the core tenet of liberal feminism is that resources should be evenly distributed between men and women. Liberal feminism primarily focuses on making legal changes through large group buy-in. And so what that means is they try their best to appeal to everyone to get changes passed in law to make sure that resources are redistributed equally. So we might already be able to see some of the typical criticisms of legal feminism. For instance, the world is made up of much more than just women and men. And just because resources are generally divided equally between women and men doesn't mean that all men get equal resources or that all women get equal resources. So just because the pie is split in half doesn't mean that everyone is still getting an equal slice. But the goal of liberal feminism is to make sure that everyone has a slice, the same size slice of the pie. So it's equality for everyone. So when we shift to radical feminism, whereas liberal feminism wants everyone to have the same slice of the resource pie, radical feminism asks us to imagine what are the other types of desserts we could make with those resources. We are not just limited to pie. You know, maybe instead of everyone getting something equal, whether they like it or not, people should be able to get what they like and need, right? So we're shifting from liberal feminism to radical feminism. We're partially shifting from equality to the notion of equity. Not does everyone have the same thing or the same amount, but does everybody have what they individually need? So those are kind of the differences. Radical feminism is a little less concerned with making legal changes because radical feminism is questioning the hierarchy of the existing legal structures themselves. Maybe we would want to change those. So whereas liberal feminism might say something like women should also be drafted along with men, or women should be free to serve in the military in every position men are. Radical feminism might say maybe we should reconsider the nature of our military. Maybe we should make our military much smaller. Maybe we should divest ourselves of most of our defense contractors, etc. So radical feminism is about making bigger structural changes than just saying, let's keep the structures we have and make sure everyone has equal access to them, which is liberal feminism. Radical feminism is about questioning the structures themselves, and as such, it's often very polarizing. So next we have Black feminism. So where, again, liberal feminism is saying, at its best, let's make sure that everybody gets an equal size piece of the pie. Black feminism starts to question the very nature of pie, right? So if we think of our Southern comfort food dishes, one of the things that we think of in terms of pie is sweet potato pie, right? And so Black feminism would ask us to remember that many of the Southern dishes that we're most well versed in, including sweet potato pie, involved out of the creativity of Black women when Black communities were only allowed primarily to grow and harvest crops that weren't seen as valuable by slave owners in the South, including things like collard greens, okra, sweet potatoes. And so while Black women have been able to make culinary magic out of these things to the extent that it kind of defines the cuisine of a region, Black feminism asks us to acknowledge it is not enough for everyone to get a slice of the pie, but we actually have to look at the historical, structural factors of oppression that go into what types of pie are available, who's working in the kitchen to make the pie. Are they being compensated fairly for their work, etc.? So I do kind of want to go over this picture that I use for Black feminism really quickly. You'll notice there's no pie or dessert in it. I use this photo because I got all of my photos from a free stock photo website, and I ran searches for Southern food, comfort food, soul food, and in all the searches I could think to run, this was the only picture in which a Black person showed up in every search. And so I sort of felt like I had to use it. Deconstructing this picture in and of itself is kind of interesting. But the core of Black feminism is really and truly getting back to that idea of it's not enough for everyone to get an equal slice of the pie. We have to acknowledge that there are historical factors leading to what are the ingredients of the pie and who is making the pie and who is being asked to do the labor to grow the food that goes into the pie and who is benefiting from that. So again, whereas liberal feminism is about everyone having an equal slice of the resource pie, Marxist feminism might call into question our very ideas of what pie is. So, whereas dessert pies are they've always existed, but they're more associated with the upper class, hand pies are a dish associated with the working class. They can be sweet or savory. There's something you can pack in a lunch. There's something you can eat while you're working. Whereas dessert pies that we traditionally think of, the ones that we get our beautiful pie graphs from, are a little bit more associated with long, decadent meals and having the extra resources, particularly sugar, which has a very kind of long, dark, complicated history wrapped up in imperialism and colonialism. And if you don't know about it, you absolutely should do some research. So those traditional dessert pies really represent surplus labor being taken from the proletariat or the working class and seized by the bourgeois or the property owning class to make these long, elaborate feasts of more food than they need, of food for pleasure rather than food for sustenance, of food where you can sit down for a long, leisurely meal rather than food that you eat quickly on the job. So Marxist feminism is asking us to understand the history of what counts as pie and who gets to eat pie and whose labor goes in to making that pie, and who gets the benefits of the pie. So then we might go to transnational feminism, and all of these, I should note, are catch-all terms. There are many subsections and divisions within each of the types of feminism that I'm talking about today. This is just a general primer. So transnational feminism would say those aren't just hand pies, those are empanadas or dumplings. And in fact, every culture has some type of dessert that can be either sweet or savory, that is in this shape, that can be baked or fried, and that is quick and filling and delicious. And so transnational feminism is asking us to look at what are the assumptions we make when we even name this thing a hand pie versus an empanada versus another culturally appropriate name for this dish that appears in every culture, right? So when we focus on them as hand pies, which is the traditional name in the majority white culture where I am from, that reveals our bias on Western food culture, Western knowledge, etc. And so transnational feminism asks us to say, hey, we all have some variety of this dish, right? And so that is where we can come together, right? So we can both celebrate the uniqueness of our individual culture around this dish, but also acknowledge that the working class of every nation has more in common with each other than the ruling class of any nation. And so transnational feminism asks us to critique, if you really love, I am trying to think of a dish like a sweet ube dessert, that often comes from the Philippines, right? And that's your favorite thing to get at Trader Joe's or Whole Foods. Transnational feminism is asking you to think about the politics and the labor and the gasoline that went into making that available to you, and the cultural stereotyping that sometimes goes on in making those desserts seem exotic or cool or neat to you because they're not part of your culture. So those are some of the things that transnational feminism asks us to do. And last but not least, in eco-feminism, we're reminded that we don't have pie without farming, and we don't have farming without how we treat the land. And so if we just focus on a traditional Western dessert pie, that can lead to monoculture farming of pie ingredients. So wheat for the crust, sugar, orchards full of fruit, and none of those things are inherently bad. However, when we steal land to farm on, when we cut down forests, when we take land away from indigenous people, when we do massive monoculture farming, when corporations spray pesticides on our food that might be harmful for us, or they sue small farmers for natural cross-pollination with branded types of crops, etc. That is all indicative of the fact that the way we treat the earth as a resource is very much tied up in how patriarchy treats women and women's bodies as a resource to be exploited. So it's not an accident that a lot of euphemisms for sex are also farming euphemisms. So it's very much this idea that men dominate women and the earth as resources for them to conquer, and that this is unsustainable. So the struggle to end sexist oppression must also be a struggle to end environmental degradation. So again, this is just kind of a quick primer. It's a tiny bit tongue-in-cheek, because human rights are not pie, right? And the core of the message is you cannot give away too many rights, because it's not like a pie where if you cut an extra slice for someone, there's less for someone else. There are always more rights. And I think the core message of all of these types of feminism is that the idea that human rights are scarce is in itself a patriarchal fiction that needs to be overcome. So I hope that this has been helpful. I look forward to anyone who wants to offer some critique or go into more detail or take this up and go into some of these subsections of feminism. Have a great day, everyone.